Hello, everybody. Michelle Smith here with Z&B Consulting, and today we have Karthika Gupta with us, and she is going to talk to us about the role of photography in business. Welcome, Karthika.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I just started saying your name, I wondered, am I saying it the right way? So did I get that right, or do you want to re-pronounce it for people?
It is, you got it right. It is Karthika Gupta.
Awesome. Awesome. Wonderful. I was like, oh, I should have probably asked it up because that's what I always say, but you never know if you're saying someone's name right. So
that's
wonderful.
No
Wonderful. Well, Karthika today is going to really help us understand the role of photography in business. And we're going to get to know her a little bit before she digs in. And then at that point, we're going to talk about the relationship between photography and marketing. We're also going to look at the key elements of a good photograph, the key elements of branded business content, and then we're going to look at when you get photographs done professionally versus self-brewing your photos and doing them yourself. And then Karthika is going to kind of wrap it up with some next steps for you, as well as she has some really cool freebies that she's going to offer. So let's dig right in. And Karthika, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I actually have not been a photographer my entire life. I actually have a business background, and I worked in corporate for a very long time, for almost like 13 years. And I was doing marketing in some sense, but it was more related to the phone channel. So I worked for Citigroup, and I was managing their phone channels. And it's a slightly different mindset from a traditional marketing kind of position, but somewhere along the line, I kind of wanted a little bit of a challenge in terms of just exercising, I guess, both sides of my brain. I never considered myself very creative when I was growing up. A lot of the creative aspect kind of stayed with my my mom and my sister. They're both incredible artists, and I just felt like, I didn't have that creative bug. But when I kind of had kids and started kind of documenting, that aspect, that avenue of my life, I realized that I did have a passion for it, and I kind of went full stream in 2010. So I've been a photographer now for about 7 years. I have two sort of businesses. I first started off with doing a lot of travel photography, and hence, I had my brand called Memorable Jaunts, but then I, just last year, I transitioned more to me as my brand, and so I kind of rebranded everything, and now it's, KarthikaGupta.com, and I specialize in weddings, family portraits, editorials, and as well as business branding, and this is something that I'm very, very excited and passionate about because I can now kind of mix the two, like my corporate life, what I did, in my past professional life, and kind of mix it with photography because photography is incredibly important, not just for, your day-to-day memories or those special moments, but even as part of your business, it's so important to have a good visual aesthetic. And I also actually teach photography. I do a lot of online and in-person workshops, and I write articles for a couple of online schools that teach photography.
Very cool, very cool. And I've seen lots of Karthika's work before. She's done some really excellent branding photos for lots of different business owners that I know, and really wanted to make sure to introduce to you guys. And as we go through these slides, there's some great examples of some of the photography that she's done and a lot of the different branded photos, and so it's going to be lots of fun. So very cool, Karthika. Thank you again for taking time to share your knowledge with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure.
So let's get into the first topic. The first topic is going to be photography and the marketing dance. So what can you share with us about that?
Sure. So like I alluded to earlier, right, I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about because of my past experience. And I guess what we realize, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, is that, visual content is so important in today's marketplace. And more so because everything is now online. Everybody has a smartphone, and the kind of I guess metrics is that you have 3 seconds to grab somebody's attention before they just kind of scroll. So that really makes photography very important. I mean, you can have amazing content and you can have amazing copy, but being so visually attuned, not having the right imagery or aesthetics that go with it, just makes everything fall flat. And so, you find that your marketing maybe doesn't have the results that you want. People are not coming to your website, or people are coming and they're leaving right away. So it's very important to understand that visuals, along with copy, are very important. You can't just pick one and just expect it to kind of pull its weight.
So very true. Very well said. Very well said. And you hit on some really great points as far as you don't have a lot of time to catch someone's attention. And it really stinks when you spend all that time writing good copy and having a good plan out there, and now it's in front of people, but you're not catching them. And the photograph really can sell that and make the difference there. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Sure. And, even when we do like email, right? I mean, even with email, we send email copy, and if there's nothing attracting the viewer when they click on the email, guess what? They're just going to move on. It's just going to be read because everybody is trying to clear their inbox, right? Nobody wants to have like 100 emails sitting there not being read, but you literally have a couple of seconds, so why not grab them, hook them in with something visually striking, and then give them the opportunity to read what you spend hours and hours kind of figuring out. So let the two work together. It shouldn't be one versus the other.
Yeah, and I love how you describe that as the dance, because it really is. It's like you think about people out there dancing together, and yeah, your copy and your photographs should be dancing together and working together. I love that. Love
Absolutely.
That.
And I'm a terrible dancer. in real life, I can't move.
It's a good thing you know how to have the marketing dance with your photographs, so. So tell us what are the key elements of good photography? Because in one person's mind it may be different than another, and I see so many business owners that, I've taken these pictures and they're good, or I took these pictures and they just look terrible. And so what are the elements to make the photographs good?
Sure. So it's actually not very complicated when you break it down, Michelle. I mean, there are what I feel are three very key elements that can make a good photograph. One is light, and light is different. There are, during the day, think about like the daytime, right? The light kind of goes across such a great spectrum. You have, morning light, which is nice and soft, and then you have, midday sun, which is harsh, and, there are a lot of shadows. And then as you go towards the evening, it starts to become this beautiful golden hue. I mean, although today it doesn't quite seem like that, but in general, like a good summer day, that's kind of what you see. And then as the sun sets, you have this beautiful blue light across the sky. Now, light isn't bad, it's just different. So at different times of the day, light is different, and you just have to train your eye to recognize what time of day it is, what type of light it is, and kind of, adjust your photos accordingly. Now, if you look at this picture, I intentionally left it in there because I think it's a great example showing you how just across this one image, you have two different kinds of light. The light on the right is warmer. It is more yellow toned. It's sunlight. Whereas the light on the left is darker because it's in the shadow. So this essentially was taken on my front porch, and you can almost see that there is a breakup between the two different kinds of light. They're not bad. The cooler light, the one on the left, it doesn't necessarily look bad. It's just different. And the same thing, the light on the right is brighter. It's warmer. It's warmer as in more golden, right? The next thing you kind of look at is subject matter. What is it that you're photographing? Are you photographing products? Are you photographing people? Or are you photographing a place? Maybe it's your storefront, or maybe it's a location that you've gone to. So whatever it is, what is the subject matter? A good photograph should have a good, strong subject. If there are a lot of things happening, a lot of people in the frame, it just gets confusing because the viewer now doesn't know, should I focus on subject A or should I focus on subject B? Now, this photograph here has a lot of elements here as well, but it's an invitation suite. So they kind of all fit together. But, you know, when I look at it, right, I see the whole collage of elements, and I also see those gold pins that are really attractive to me. But that's just how I see it. You might see it and you know, look at it and you might see the place cards. So it's whatever it is, just, you know, what is the subject and are you kind of communicating that effectively? The next and the third piece is the emotional appeal. What do you want how do you want the viewer to react? Do you want to, you know, elicit a reaction of, oh, wow, or is it like, oh, that's so cute, or whatever it is, right? Is your image conveying that emotion? So if you keep these three things in mind when you're photographing, you will find that you start training yourself to think in a certain way and to photograph a certain way. Now, you know, if this is not something that, you know, kind of is attractive for your brand, then, you know, by all means ignore it. But I think by and large, most people will kind of benefit by keeping these three key things in mind, particularly when you're looking at creating branded images for your business, whatever your business may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. Such great examples, too. Let's shift now to branded content. What are the key elements there?
So branded content is, you know, it kind of uses a lot of the things that we talked about in the other slide as well. But two things that really, in my mind, strike out or kind of come out is the fact that branded content is the content you want to use to attract your customers, to attract the right kind of clients, right? You know, let's face it, we all get clients that are our ideal clients, and then we get clients who maybe are not our ideal clients. Maybe they're coming to us because of price or, you know, a referral or something else, right? And now, by having content out there that is the kind of work that you want or the kind of people that you want to work with, you are giving that clear message that, hey, if you kind of belong to this category, if you see yourself in these pictures, then you are my right client. If you do not, then my style of photography or your product or whatever the service you're offering, maybe not the right fit. And it's much better, so much better to have your website, your content, your copy kind of communicate that, as opposed to talking to them, investing time and effort, and then realizing that, oh my God, this is not the kind of, you know, client that I want to work with. And also the second aspect is it has a call to action appeal, right? Now, being a photographer, I want to work with brands. I want to work with people. Now, in this example, this is my son, actually, both my boys. They were just having ice cream, and it was actually my son's birthday, and I had just bought him clothes from Zara. Now, I would love to do a campaign for Zara. That was not happening at that point. So he was already dressed and he was eating ice cream, and I clicked a few pictures and I posted them on my social media and I tagged Zara. Now, this is my aesthetic, and it kind of resonates with Zara's aesthetic as well. And guess what? Zara actually kind of reposted it on their Instagram feed. So I got a ton of eyes looking at it. Now, regardless of whether something came out of it or not, my objective to have my content put out there for potentially the right kind of clients was successful. So not only was I attracting the right kind of customers, I was having a call to action saying that, hey, you know what, this is a cool outfit, and Zara rebranded it. So I thought it was a huge win for me, and it kind of solidified my understanding that the right kind of materials, the right kind of copy, the right kind of imagery all tied together communicate that story that I want my potential clients to see.
Awesome, awesome. Such great, great stuff. And you're so right. You have to, and we speak a lot about this in a lot of my different trainings and coaching with clients, is making sure that you really do understand who it is that you want to attract and who you don't want to attract, and being true to that. And I love that you're sharing with us how the photos tie in with that too, because that's so important. I was speaking. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was speaking recently, and one of the things I speak a lot about is doing what makes your heart sing. And as I was preparing for this talk, I was going to be speaking to a room full of men. And I had to really think, am I going to go into this topic with a room full of men or not? And it always resonates really well with women, but I wasn't sure about the men. And so as I do before I often speak, I pray, and God, please let the right words come to the people who need to hear them, that I'm going to be speaking to. And I went forward and I spoke to these men about making your heart sing, and was really just in alignment with what it is that I teach and I speak about. And I had so many of them afterwards come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you talked about that. That's so important. And it really hit home with a lot of them. And I even shared that the same story that I just did with them about how when I go speak, I talk to God and say, please let the words that these people need come out of my mouth. And I'm always careful about, it used to be earlier in my career, I used to wonder, well, should I share that kind of stuff? Should I be so open about my faith, or should I be so open about emotional kind of stuff, because maybe people don't want to hear it? And then you learn very quickly that no, if they don't want to hear it, they're not your ideal client. That's fine. Not everybody is going to be. And it does. It will repel the wrong client, and that's okay, because I don't want those clients. And so I love how you hit on that, and how you hit about how the photos tie into that too, because that's so important.
No, absolutely. And we don't realize it sometimes, and perhaps it's a thing that we mature into, but yes, we all need money. We all need money to survive. But we also want to do the work that really excites us and really that we are passionate about, because then you give it your 500%. I mean, it really does make your heart sing when, you have the right client, and the client is so on board with everything. The client trusts you. The client values your expertise, because that just gives you additional confidence. So, don't worry about those people who say, you know what, maybe not right now. Maybe I already have a photographer, or whatever it is, right? That's fine. If they are meant to be your clients, they will be your clients. If they're not, they're not. Just move on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a cutie that your son is. Those pictures are adorable.
Yeah, I think at the end of the shoot, the dog did get some of the ice cream.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, let's talk about, as you said, sometimes I'm sure as a photographer you run into people who are like, yeah, no, I'm just going to take my own pictures, or I already have a photographer, and again, the right people are going to be attracted to you, and you move on. But tell us about, the differences here about getting professional photos versus doing them yourself.
Sure. So, there are two different ways, right? One, like the slide says, there's, the self-brewed approach, where either you give your camera to your cousin, or, if you have somebody on your staff who's an amateur photographer, you hand them the camera and say, go ahead, click photos of the products. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just kind of trying to educate that there are different ways of doing it, and you do you in however you want to do it. Just understanding what are the pros and cons of each method, right? So you can either go the self-brewed route, where it's definitely more cost-effective, but I put in the short term, because at some point, as you're getting ready to scale up, you will realize that branding is very, very important. And if now is not the right time, that's totally fine. But just keep in mind that when you do self-brewed, when you kind of go do it yourself approach, sometimes even what you perceive to be cost-effective may not be the case in the long run. It's definitely less time consuming because, you kind of think about it in a very short, individual project or individual product type mindset where you just want to get these photographs, you just want to upload them, and you want to use them because you're either you're running into a show, or you have to send out this marketing email or whatever the case may be. So it's definitely less time consuming. And there is a little bit of perception of having control because, everything is in-house. Either you're doing it or somebody, is doing it, or somebody on your staff is doing it. So you can have that control by communicating with them every step of the way, right? So there's that perceived notion of, hey, I have full control, I can do it, I'm not relying on somebody else. If you go the professional photography route, it does tend to get more expensive because, let's face it, I mean, we're all, a professional photographer is still a professional. I mean, they are charging for their talent, they're charging for the gear that they have, they're charging for any, kind of courses that they have taken, that they have become to that professional level. So there's a lot that goes into, becoming a professional photographer, which might not be obvious to someone who isn't in that field. But like a professional, they are charging for their expertise, so it tends to be more expensive. And if you put in a huge scope project, then of course the dollars are going to kind of increase. From your perspective, it's more an effective use of your time and resources. You're not sitting there figuring out, is the light right? Is the background right? Are the products laid out correctly? Does it fit into my aesthetics? How do I edit these photos? How do I upload them? You're not figuring out all these things, so it's definitely more effective use of your time. You can go do the things that really drive your business from, a product or service perspective. It also helps build a professional network. I mean, you might bring in the photographer, you might bring in a stylist, you might, kind of bring in somebody to rent props. So all of those people add up to your professional network. And, we all want to have a network of colleagues and peers and friends that we can kind of reach out to whenever, we have the need, or just to have a conversation, right? I mean, it's all about building that network. You have a technical expert on your side. Like I said earlier, you're not figuring out all the little nuances that go into good photography. You have somebody who is trained, who is knowledgeable, who does that, kind of as their profession, so they know exactly what they're talking about. There is a lot of teamwork that goes in, and there's a higher probability of success just because now people who are experts in what they do are doing the work. And it's not like jack of all trades, right? So there are two different ways to look at it. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just, what you feel comfortable doing. Be comfortable in selecting that option. Just be educated in both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I love that. Those are some great points to think about. And, I'm always talking with my clients about there's people on different scopes of the spectrum, and sometimes you're at that point in your business where you do have to do things yourself, or sometimes that's something, back to what makes your heart sing, it's something that you enjoy, or you have a good skill in it and you enjoy doing it, so you go ahead and do it. But there's other times where, as you explained really well, you can be getting so much else done in your genius zone if you're letting somebody else do the photographs, if you're somebody who isn't sure about lighting or how to set them up and to do all of that. And I love the details there on each side, because at any point in someone's business, they'll fluctuate between what makes sense for them and what doesn't. So those are some really good ways to think about it and some good things to think. So
absolutely. And, even if you do kind of fluctuate, one thing I will say is that keep your, and I know we'll get into that later, keep your aesthetics in mind, because you might have amazing content, amazing brand, stunning, professional photographs, and say there's a small campaign that you just want to get done and you say, I'll just take it with my phone. Just keep in mind how it looks overarching, like a holistic approach, right? You don't want to have everything looking fabulous and then this one particular campaign that doesn't quite fit aesthetically. So no matter what you choose, just kind of be aware of the holistic approach to your entire brand and your entire visual content strategy.
Very true. Great tips. So tell us a little bit more about that and how to photograph your actual brand.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a good segue into this. So brand aesthetics is basically what your brand looks and what emotions it conveys and what how it resonates with your clients, right? So that's what we say when we use the terminology brand aesthetics. It's color, it's font, it's style, it's everything that's related to your brand. And yes, in case of small businesses, sometimes we are our brand, but we also have a message that we communicate online and offline. So everything collectively kind of it falls under the umbrella of brand aesthetics. And here is where it really behooves us to be consistent. I mean, consistency is very critical. Now, my style of photography, I like things that are light, and I like airy photographs. I like clean, natural-looking photographs. That's my brand. That's how my brand is. That's how I am as a person as well. And hopefully that's the messaging that I'm conveying across all the channels that I participate in, be it online or offline, right? Now, that's not to say that at some point I might not go photograph something, that gives out a more dark, moody, kind of emotional kind of a tone. But a lot of times that doesn't quite make it into my portfolio just because I feel it would confuse my audience. If somebody's coming looking for lifestyle photos that are, fun and fresh and natural, and they see these dark, like selective light and super saturated images, they can get very confused. They wouldn't know which type of photographer I am. Same thing if somebody is doing products. I mean, if you have a certain set of products, if they look and feel a certain way, unless you have really good reason why, and you communicate that reason, don't change things up because it's not consistent anymore. Also, when you photograph for your brand, you have to, and this is so critical, you have to have a good idea of your customer, your potential customer. Who are you serving, right? And this is a terminology that's used a lot in marketing these days. Who is your ideal client? What does your ideal client look like? What is your avatar? And the avatar is things that are sometimes very, very basic. Where do they shop? What kind of drink do they drink? What are they doing at between 2 to 3 o'clock? What sort of TV shows do they watch? I mean, all these things, because you want to put yourself in the place of your customer and see what is it that they are looking for and how can I serve that need. So it's very important to, again, be consistent by connecting all the dots across the board. And lastly, who is the person behind the brand, right? I mean, I kind of talk about my style of photography, and that is how I am as a person too. I like bright, light, muted colors, and that's kind of my closet is generally just whites and grays and blues, because that's how I like to dress. So it's easy for me then to connect the dots between my personal brand and my business brand, because I am my brand, right? So that might not be for people who have big teams and stuff like that. That's okay. Just understand where you are and be consistent across the board.
Very good, very good. And I do have a training. If anyone anyone listening is interested in going through it, it's a training on IDing your target market. So figuring out and identifying who your actual target market is, and it gets you to think through a lot of those things that Karthika mentioned, and get those specifics so that you can then be able to figure out how to narrow that photography. So anyone listening wants that resource, just reach out to me and we can get that over to you. So here are some examples Karthika has shared with us of her Instagram. And we can really see through these pictures what you were sharing, Karthika, and how your images all do look similar in terms of, lighting and being airy and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I kind of intentionally put my brand colors on the right. Again, this is, when I work through a graphic designer and a website designer, these are the things that I kind of had a mood board and I gravitated towards these colors. And so this is what my brand coloring looks like. And you can see how I very intentionally use those sort of colors in my imagery. Again, I am trying to attract a certain type of client. And when my client looks at these images, they can get a feel for what type of photographer I am. So that, again, going back to a few slides ago when we talked about, attracting the right type of client and repelling the wrong type of client, I hope that my visual presence online does that for me, because I'm not 24/7 online, but guess what? My brand is. My images are. So, somebody going in, sitting maybe in India who is looking for a photographer for a wedding that they're doing here might look at it at 2 o'clock in the morning my time. I'm not on, but my brand is. So hopefully they get that imagery or that the idea of what sort of imagery they can get.
Wonderful. And a perfect example, too, of the consistency you talked about, which is so important and something I talk to clients about all the time, is be consistent, be intentional, so that you can be successful. And I love how your photography principles tie into that. And it really makes me think, too, there's lots of photographers out there, and I have lots of really great photographers that I know, and Karthika is one of them. But I also have come across photographers who weren't that great either. And so just as Karthika is sharing with us that you need to be consistent and make sure you're using images that attract that right client, make sure that when you are looking for a photographer that they're in alignment with the types of pictures that you need too, because there are different styles and there are different types out there, and you want to find that photographer who's in alignment with your brand too.
Absolutely. I mean, as a photographer, you do have the technical skills to photograph, pretty much in most scenarios and most looks and feel, but it's just an added effort. Like if somebody came to me and said, here's, $5,000 and I want you to photograph dark, moody sort of images, would I probably do it? I don't know. Maybe 5,000 is a good chunk of change, but it's just going to be so much harder for me to get that aesthetic and that look, because that's not what comes to me naturally. So just keep that in mind. And so a lot of times we establish, like just as you establish relationship with clients, photographers establish relationship with their clients, and the vice versa. So if you have a photographer that you really love and you want to work with them, absolutely just be very conscious of what is it you want to get out of it. Don't just price is not the only thing that should matter.
Yeah, I love that. I try to teach that to clients so much, because it's so easy when you're running a business and you're looking at just a certain amount of dollars that you have to spend and so many needs that are out there. It can be easy to just look at price, but sometimes the price doesn't always get you, a lower price doesn't always get you what you need in terms of quality. And as you shared before, there's lots of skills and expertise and equipment and all that comes into a price for a photographer that people often don't think about. So,
absolutely.
So yeah, we always have to be careful in our business not to go where to the cheapest route, because sometimes it'll get us the cheapest results, and if we don't necessarily want that, that's not in alignment with our businesses. So wonderful. Some more tips here.
Yeah, so these are, there's so many. I just, picked a few of them just to kind of, help the conversation. But pay attention to light. Like I said before, light is not necessarily bad. It's just different. And if you're in a pinch, just look at window light. Window light is amazing light because your window acts as a diffuser. So even though it's 12 o'clock at noon and it's really harsh light, the light that comes in filtered through your window is much, much softer. So if you have a choice between window light and using the horrible fluorescent artificial light, choose the window light. Your pictures will look so much cleaner. Pay attention to background. Keep things as clear and clean as possible. Sometimes you can even just use like a white sheet, and if you're doing products, right, just use a white sheet and put your products on a white sheet. It's clean, is always way better than cluttered. And if you can see that little broom in the corner, guess what? That little broom is going to make its way in your photograph. So just be very aware of what's around you. And sometimes, it kind of sneaks in the frame, and then you're like, oh my God, I wish I'd kind of cleaned that out. Pay attention to content. Is this content really relevant? If you're photographing a product with a lot of other accessories in the frame, is it really relevant? Is it going to make or break the product photo, or is it just fluff that you probably don't even need? So anyway, clean is always better. Less cluttered is always better. It just, by having, single or very few subjects, the image just speaks so much more than having it completely cluttered and too many things going on, and it's very confusing for the viewer.
Very good. Very, very good. So you've shared lots with us today, lots of great, valuable information. Share with us the best next steps that everyone can take.
Sure. So, in terms of next steps, right, no matter which method you choose, whether you hire a professional photographer or you do it self-boot, or maybe you even, go out there to some of the stock sites and either download, free stock photos or, use stock photography, it doesn't matter. Whatever you choose, right, have a plan, have a game plan, have a content strategy. How are you going to use those images? What is going to be the messaging that, that's going to be around those images? Because that will help dictate as well, what is it you want to use, stock or do it yourself or hire a professional. Break it down into small manageable chunks. I mean, maybe the project is huge and, investing a couple of $1,000s is not for you right now. That's okay. Break it down into small manageable chunks like everything else, and, work at those chunks individually, but having the bigger picture in mind. And think about how you can effectively use your images. How can they add value? How do they solve a potential problem that a customer is having and hence needs your services? And how can they elevate your brand impression? So images are very, very strong, guys. And, the right image can convey so much more than just, having words, paragraphs and paragraphs about it. So just really think about how the image can work to your benefit. And whatever you choose, like I've said before, be consistent. If that's, if you're doing the self DIY route, that's fine. Just be consistent. Look at your brand. Look at the brand aesthetics. Be aware of the colors. Be aware of the look and feel. And just be consistent in what you choose, because being all over the place, while that might be easy, it's not going to help you in the long run.
Very good. Very good. And Karthika has some freebies for us. Tell us about that.
So I, like Michelle, you kind of, when you introduced me, you talked about branding. So I offer branding services for small business owners. And sometimes, like I've, kind of said as well, that if that is not, if paying those dollars is not for you, that's okay. Maybe you can use some stock for some time. And so I have a group of people who have signed up and who I provide free stock photos to every month. Not only do you get stock photos that are slightly more customized, but also they are generic, so you can use them too. And some popular hashtags and caption prompts. So if you're stuck and you don't know what to post, or if you want to, kind of use social media, you just don't know what to say, I provide some hints or some tips on what you can say and some images that can help you get to that point. So the link is in the slide. You can just click on the link and you can just sign up, and pretty much it's automated. Every month you will get 4 stock images, and then you'll have the captions and hashtags.
Wonderful, wonderful. What a great resource for business owners out there. Love it. And for those who are sitting there and have been thinking, wow, I really like her style of photography. I may want to have her do some photos for my business, or I may want to take one of her classes so that I can learn a little better as I'm taking these pictures for myself. Here's how they can reach you.
Yes, absolutely. And like Michelle, like you said, I do classes. I do a basics in photography class, and I also do a Role of business in photography, which is it's an extension of this presentation. We actually get hands-on. We learn about flat lays. We figure out product. We figure out how to do headshots. So a lot of kind of practical aspect of it as well. So either of those classes, I think I'm going to be offering them again in 2018. So just stay tuned for that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Karthika, thank you so much for taking time to share with us today, and we really do appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, Michelle. Thank you for having me.